now for the first time on TV. The stories and reports of the people who fly and the aircraft they fly. And you are invited in an exciting, pulse-pumping new television series designed for everyone who has ever gazed skywards and dreamt of slipping the bonds of Earth. The Aviators.
This week on The Aviators, it's all about airlines as we take you inside WestJet, which operates one of the newest fleets in North America. We're going to show you what a typical day is like for a Boeing 737 pilot. Curtis is heading behind the scenes as we tell you all about airliner maintenance. And we look at how RNP and winglets can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. From the Boundary Bay Airport, this is The Aviators.
WestJet started operations in 1996 with 3 aircraft, 5 destinations, and less than 200 employees. Since then, they've become a major airline, with 90 aircraft serving 71 destinations in 12 countries, supported by nearly 8,000 employees. And through this remarkable period of growth, they've managed to develop a corporate culture that's won awards across the country. We came to Calgary to get the story behind the story about this remarkable airline.
For the past 2 decades, the airline industry has faced severe challenges. Faced with skyrocketing costs of jet fuel and increased maintenance costs on newer and more complicated airplanes and flight systems, a number of airlines have downsized, amalgamated, or even gone out of business. The events of 9/11 have added more pressure on airline business models to adapt to tightened security and aircraft loads that have decreased on safety concerns. Despite this hostile business environment, WestJet has managed to not only stay afloat, but to also expand. They now operate one of the newest fleets in North America, exclusively flying the next generation Boeing 737s. This growth has been achieved while also fostering and maintaining a corporate culture that is considered one of the best in the industry. The majority of the company's employees, known as WestJetters, are also owners as a result of an ambitious employee stock purchase program. The idea behind this being that the more employees care about the customers and about the company, the more successful they'll become as a whole. A culture like this starts straight from the top, and to find out more, Curtis spoke to one of the company's vice presidents, Richard Bartram. WestJet has also taken the lead on the environment, and Richard told us all about it.
WestJet's known around the world as an airline that innovates. It innovates in its approach to growth and innovates in its approach to improving efficiencies. We're here talking to Richard. One of the things that's unique about WestJet is its innovative approach to environmental issues.
Yeah, I mean, really for us, the environment certainly is an important component of a lot of the work that we do here at WestJet, but really it's driven from an efficiency perspective. The more efficient we can make ourselves as an airline, that's better for the guests that are flying with us, better for the shareholder, and ultimately better for the environment.
Now we're in kind of a unique new building that WestJet built to kind of get everybody together.
Yeah, this is our pride and joy. This is the WestJet campus building located here in Calgary. 6-story, little over 300,000 square foot campus. Prior to moving in here last year, we were in 7 buildings located across the city. So we're always in the wrong place at the wrong time, and for an airline that prides itself on being on time, not a good position to be in. So we built this and opened it up in April of 2009 and been here ever since.
While bringing their employees together at the Calgary campus is certainly a boost to WestJet's corporate culture, it also has a number of environmental benefits as well. Built to a Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, or LEED standard, the building is projected to save approximately 1,250 tons of CO2 emissions per year. It's just one of the building blocks of their environmental strategy.
Yeah, certainly there's a number of things that we do from an environmental perspective and from an efficiency perspective, and really it gets down to 5 pillars. Fleet renewal that we have undertaken over the last several years. We were flying Boeing 737-200s prior to the next generation fleet coming on board with WestJet, so that has been a dramatic shift for us. Our footprint, reducing our footprint, our carbon footprint across the operations that we have here in Canada, so we continue to do work with that. We also are getting smarter about the way we fly, so that's everything from RNP approaches to reducing weight on board the aircraft, flying to more direct approaches, and then finally engaging our WestJetters, getting their opinions. We've actually had some of our most innovative ideas come from the people who actually do the work and have come forward with ideas on how they think we could be more efficient and more environmentally friendly.
So for a guest that's flying on WestJet, how would they recognize these efficiencies?
Well, it's everything from some of them they would see. If you look out your window, you're certainly going to see a winglet on board the aircraft. And winglets for us have been a terrific addition to the fleet. We have them on our two largest aircraft, the 700 and the 800, are all equipped with these winglets, which reduce drag, which in turn reduces the amount of fuel required from anywhere from 2 to 3%. So that you would certainly see. Things like RNP, which is required navigation performance, you wouldn't necessarily feel that. It would just be a different way of us approaching an airport in a more direct manner, which in turn reduces fuel, reducing the amount of potable water carried on board the aircraft you wouldn't necessarily see, but something that we actively work on to make sure that we're carrying the least amount of weight possible on board the aircraft.
The more weight that's on board an aircraft, the more energy is required to get that aircraft in the air. That means more fuel gets used. With 430 flights a day, even a minor reduction in the weight of an aircraft can result in large savings of fuel and in CO2 emissions. One of the biggest ways WestJet reduced the weight is water.
This idea came from a WestJetter where what we needed to do was carry the right amount of potable water on board the aircraft. Unfortunately, we didn't have external water gauges that would allow us to do that. So working with Boeing, we now have our fleet outfitted with external water gauges, and we're carrying the right amount of water for each of the destinations that we serve. Same thing with fuel. You don't fill the tanks up all the way if you're only flying from Calgary to Edmonton. You put the right amount of fuel on board because that fuel is excess weight. We've even looked at things, for example, our in-flight magazine, Up magazine, we changed the substrate, the paper that it's printed on, because having a lighter paper on board the aircraft, when you multiply it by the billions of seat miles that we're flying over the course of the year, that has an impact. So little 2 to 3% doesn't sound like much, but when you add it up and multiply it by the volume that we are flying over the course of the year, a significant impact on our operations.
On a global scale, these efforts really don't have a huge effect. WestJet is just one company, and the aviation industry as a whole only accounts for 2% of worldwide greenhouse gas emissions.
The easy way out would be to say, well, so what, we're only 2%, but we don't look at it that way. Most airlines don't look at it that way because it is how can we drive more efficiencies into the organization. Any efficiencies that we drive in are in turn a benefit to the environment. So that's the big thing for us is how can we be more efficient? That can actually make us a better airline and a more environmentally friendly airline, and that's what we drive towards.
Creating a more environmentally friendly airline is one of the many challenges employees of airlines face every day. For Richard, working in aviation and the challenges that come with it are one of the parts that make him want to come to work every day.
One of the things I love the most is that it's, aviation is a very fun business. You're dealing with, there's an strong operational piece that's absolutely fascinating. When you look at the inner workings of what makes an airline tick, what makes an airport tick, absolutely fascinating. But at the same time, you're also working with the emotional component, getting people home on time, getting them home for Christmas, getting them home for key celebrations, getting them to their vacations. There's something tremendously heartwarming and feel good about doing that. But the biggest piece is every day I come to work not knowing what is going to unfold on the day. You just roll up your sleeves and pitch in.
The Aviator's guest correspondent, Raylene Roger, is no stranger to television. She flew as John Lovelace's co-pilot on Wings Over Canada for several years. Today, Raylene is a first officer with WestJet flying 737s. The Aviators decided to follow Raylene on the job and get her perspective. From a very early age, Raylene has been around airplanes, which has led her to where she is today.
My first flight was when I was 4 weeks old, only a month old. And my dad was a pilot and a maintenance engineer. He loved flying in the bush. He loved the old radial engines. He loved straight floats. He was definitely an aviation enthusiast. I was a sidekick. I grew up in the right seat. And at a young age, I knew that I would get my pilot's license. I went to college when I was 18, and when I was 23, I realized that I really missed flying. So I came back to aviation. My dad was so excited. Soon after, unfortunately, he became quite sick with cancer. And 2 years he was sick with the disease and passed away. But he always said to me he knew I would fly for an airline. He just knew. So I think he'd be pretty happy. And here I am, flying for WestJet. I just can't believe it, living the dream.
Much like her father, Raylene flew a variety of VFR bush planes for many years. After getting her instrument rating, Raylene flew for regional airlines based out of Vancouver. When not on an overnight at one of WestJet's many destinations, Raylene makes her way from home to Vancouver International Airport, where she joins her fellow WestJetters.
Years of flying VFR was a one-man band, or girl band. I had to fuel the aircraft, check the weather. I still have the same concerns here at WestJet, but now I'm part of a team. I talk to my captain, meet the flight attendants, talk with them as well. So I'm on my way now to check the gate, and we're going to have our briefing. I'm just going to look for my flight. I see it up there. It looks like we're at Alpha 4. Let's go meet the crew.
Prior to every flight, the pilot, the co-pilot, and the lead flight attendant meet to go over the details of the flight.
Okay, we're going to Calgary until 005, 40.
How many guests will be on board?
Looks like we're going to have 87 guests in the back.
What the weather en route is expected to be like.
Gusty winds out of the north.
Any expected turbulence.
Probably a few bumps on
And any issues with the in-flight entertainment. Once the aircraft pulls up to the gate, both the pilot and co-pilot begin their pre-flight checks. And just like a Cessna 172, it's up to one of them to get on the ground and do the pre-flight walk-around.
Right now I'm just looking in the blades to make sure there's no chips or anything that's bent. Just carrying on, walking around. So we've already looked at the back here of the engine. We're just going to walk the wing to make sure there's no bumps or scrapes or anything that we missed along the way. Just walking the fuselage, again, to make sure there's no damage. Just checking here to make sure there's no hydraulic fluid anywhere inside. Also just making sure our gauges are looking correct. General walkthrough.
While the pre-flight walk-around may be similar to that of a 172, a next-gen 737 is a much more complex aircraft. This, along with the responsibility of transporting hundreds of passengers every day, means that these aircraft are held to a much stricter maintenance schedule. While in Calgary, Curtis found out all about how WestJet maintains their 737s.
Every day, about 35,000 commercial aircraft crisscross the skies over North America. There's more than 5,000 in the air right now. The reliability and safety record of the airline industry is no accident. Today, the Aviators are going to take you behind the scenes at WestJet to find out what it takes to keep their fleet of Boeing 737s ready for takeoff.
To keep their 737s flying, WestJet operates a massive facility in Calgary, as well as maintenance stations all across the country. Vice President Russ White is responsible for overseeing the 450 employees who maintain WestJet's 90 aircraft. Russ spoke to Curtis while WestJet's crews were performing a 6-month inspection on one of their 737-600s.
So Russ, people are familiar with maintenance schedules on things like cars. You have to change the oil, you have to change the tires, you have to replace your timing belt. What kind of maintenance schedule exists for a jet?
We maintain the airplane in accordance with the manufacturer's specifications. So they'll give us what we call a maintenance planning document. Gives the intervals for all the tasks that are involved in maintaining the airplane. Everything from checking oils all the way up to the major structural inspections that we do at the 10 and 12-year visits. So it's a very involved maintenance program, and we will take that and evolve it into meeting our needs, and it'll all be approved by Transport Canada in the end. So the whole program is approved by Transport Canada.
As one would expect, the maintenance schedule performed on a commercial airliner is certainly more complex than a single-engine Cessna. However, many of the tasks that are performed are very similar to those that a general aviation pilot may be familiar with.
Let's talk about the maintenance schedule. How often do you change the oil in a jet?
Actually, there's no requirement to change the oil in the jet. We continuously add oil to that. It's a high-quality synthetic oil, but we will check the filters and pull what we call the magnetic plugs, check for any magnetic particles inside the engine oil, and that'll be the on-condition inspection that we do of the engine.
So how often does an engine last on a jet airplane?
Well, barring any major events like a bird strike or something like that, we expect our engines to go to what we call life-limited parts, the interval. So probably about 20,000 cycles for the engines is what we expect to get the life out of those engines, being a very reliable engine.
Now, how often do you have to change the tires on a jet?
Tires typically, though, it depends on the season we're operating in. They don't last as long in a hot environment in the summertime. So probably about 250 landings we'll get out of each tire.
For the 6-month check that this 737-600 is undergoing, WestJet has to pull the aircraft out of rotation for 2 days. This allows them to thoroughly clean the aircraft, lubricate any necessary parts, and change any belts and filters. In addition to the 6-month check, a week-long structural inspection of the aircraft takes place every 2 years. Otherwise, the majority of the maintenance on the aircraft is done at night.
Now, most of your aircraft are out on revenue flights during the day, so I imagine this place is hopping at night. What would we see if we came here late at night?
Well, late at night, you'd see more than one airplane in the hangar. Airplanes make money out on the line. So probably about 14 airplanes here. Some would be up at the ramp, some would be in the other 2 bays we have here in Calgary, and we'd be doing what we call phase checks on those airplanes, or engine inspections that come due as well. So the guys are phasing that maintenance into overnight tasks, and we don't have to take the airplane out of service for extended periods of time.
So one of the things that I guess must happen is that your aircraft fly back and forth across the continent all the time. There's got to be unscheduled things that happen. How do you manage that as an airline?
All airplanes are constantly in contact with what we call our maintenance control center, which is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if there's a problem on the airplane, we'll have guys all across Canada who are available to go out and fix that airplane, depending upon what the snag is.
So what kind of things happen in the course of a day?
It can be anything. I mean, there's so many systems on the airplane. It can anything. The guys can be called out to change a guest seatbelt, anything to a tire change, a brake change, or any snag that the pilot may discover in the operation of the airplane during the day.
Occasionally, the pilots can find potential snags during the walk-around inspection or while inspecting the cabin. Today, Raylene completed her walk-around without finding any problems, and she moves quickly inside to help prepare the cabin for departure. On WestJet flights, the captain and first officer are responsible for every aspect of the aircraft. This means they take part in grooming the cabin and actually check the seatbelts. After completing the cabin check, Raylene heads to the cockpit where she completes a pre-flight checklist with the captain. Once this is complete, she enters the current conditions into the aircraft's ACARS, or Aircraft Communication Addressing and Reporting System.
Well, I'm just going to enter in the information here. We have the ACAR takeoff conditions, so we're going to put that in right now in terms of what we have for the runway conditions, wet runway, the winds. I'm going to send it off, and it comes back incredibly fast. As I was saying before, it used to be all me when I was flying VFR. Now, part of the team. We send this off, they calculate it for us, and let us know what numbers are going to work.
This flight is the beginning of a pairing with this pilot for Raylene. She'll work 4 days with this captain and then have another 4 days off.
Today for me it's a beginning of a pairing, and I operate one flight going to Calgary, and I'm just going to put in the information. I basically get here, check in for my flight. We did our crew briefing, and now it's just a short hop over to Calgary. So it's a nice short day for me.
Raylene has to complete her pre-flight and then is off to Calgary. The passengers are boarding, and shortly the plane will taxi out onto the runway and take off into the air.
Off we go. An hour and 1 minute in the air.
For their takeoffs and landings, WestJet employs a technique known as RNP, or Required Navigation Performance. Richard mentioned this earlier, but to get the in-depth details, Curtis spoke with WestJet's Director of Flight Technical Operations, Darcy Granley.
First question is, what does RNP stand for, and what is RNP?
RNP is called Required Navigation Performance, and basically it's a method of navigation, and essentially it's using satellite-based nav aids to provide navigational guidance to airplanes.
So Darcy, WestJet's one of very few airlines in the world and the only airline in Canada to fly RNP approaches. Why did WestJet decide to pursue RNP certification?
RNP approach allows you to develop tracks around an airport that can derive operational efficiencies and avoid obstacles. It allows for more flexibility in the design of an approach. For example, with traditional navigational approaches, they're straight line approaches with very little flexibility deviating left or right of a runway. RNP approaches, you can design them so that they have curves in them, they can avoid obstacles, you can drive efficiencies in terms of shortening the tracks as you fly an approach down to a threshold of a runway. An RNP approach, you can get as close as 3 to 4 miles when you're establishing on final, and again, that's reducing track miles of anywhere up to 7 to 10 miles in terms of reduced track miles, and it can be greater than that in some of our airports.
Almost all commercial aircraft fly IFR, or Instrument Flight Rules. This means the pilots don't actually have to see where they're going, but can rely on what their instruments are telling them. By using GPS and RNP, pilots can actually achieve safer instrument approaches than they normally would.
There are essentially two types of approaches when you fly an airplane under instrument conditions. One is a precision approach, where you fly constant angle descent down to a decision point just near the threshold of a runway. And the other is what we call the dive and dive type of approaches, non-precision approaches, where you have to descend, level off till you get to a certain point, descend again. If you look at flight safety data over the years within the aviation industry, a lot of the accidents are a result of controlled flight into terrain, and often those are associated root cause having to do with non-precision approaches, doing dive and drive approaches.
With a dive and drive approach, pilots attempt to get below the weather and down to the minimum descent altitude as quickly as possible to give more time to line up to the runway. With an RNP, WestJet can approach and land safely and with ease with lower weather minimums at many airports.
In some of our airports, for example, like Kamloops, the minimums that we can fly traditional approaches to are about 1,000 feet, 3 miles, for example. With RNP approaches that we've designed into some of these terrain-rich environments, we can get down to 250, 300 feet with visibilities only requiring about 1 mile. So again, it provides us operational flexibility to get into some of these remote airports under more severe weather conditions. We've run some numbers. Over half of our approaches now that we fly are RNP approaches within WestJet's theater of operation. On average, for last year, we saved probably about 2 million liters of fuel flying RNP approaches. So that's from a fuel savings perspective, reduced track miles, flying constant angle descents. Some other opportunities for savings that we haven't quantified are, for example, we talk about operational flexibility. Instead of canceling flights or diverting to alternates because of weather and those types of challenges, that's where we've driven some efficiencies and savings. But in terms of just fuel, last year was over $2 million, and those are conservative estimates.
For guests on board a flight making an RNP approach, there would appear to be very few differences. Astute passengers may notice slight differences when compared to another carrier. While a guest may not actually see or feel the difference in an RNP approach, they certainly can see the winglets that WestJet has added to their 700 and 800 series aircraft.
So WestJet's newest aircraft are actually delivered with winglets, but you made a conscious decision a number of years ago to retrofit your existing fleet with winglets. What's the advantage of having a winglet on an airplane?
The main reason was, again, we did a cost-benefit analysis. It was fuel savings. Winglets do drive efficiency. And again, back to first principles, when you look at aerodynamics, winglets reduce the amount of induced drag on an aircraft. And again, what improved performance of about 2.7% is what we found with the addition of winglets. And again, that translates into fuel savings. Winglet basically is if you take a wing and you bent it from horizontal up to the vertical. And I mean, the size of a winglet depends on the type of aircraft that you're flying. WestJet's winglets are quite large. I mean, they're several feet in length, so there's significant protrusions on the wing.
When a traditionally designed wing moves through the air, it generates a vortex or an area of unstable air. A winglet eliminates this area of unstable air and in turn reduces the drag. This is similar to a boat moving through the water and generating less wake. For WestJet, this has meant a 2.7% efficiency gain on their 737-700 and 737-800 aircraft.
Now, 2.7%, that's a pretty big efficiency gain.
It is. It's significant. When you're burning, $800 million a year in fuel, it adds up very quickly. The other piece to it that you talk about is it with improved performance of winglets. So when you're talking about lifting weight out of an airfield, you're able to lift more of it out now because of the greater performance. So in places where you might be obstacle or field limited, runway limited, now you can take advantage of that. Those winglets and the improved performance to lift more weight potentially out of an airfield. With WestJet, when we're talking 2.7% reduced fuel burn, that translates into anywhere between $15 and $20 million a year in reduced fuel.
This savings, combined with RMP, means significantly less carbon dioxide being generated by WestJet's fleet. This allows WestJet to pass the savings on to its guests on Raylene's flight to Calgary. After making a successful RNP landing and pulling up to the gate, Raylene and her captain go through the shutdown checklist.
Fuel pumps.
They are off.
Flight deck access system switch.
Is off.
Everyone has arrived at their destination comfortably, safely, and on time. And at this point, Raylene gets out from behind the closed cockpit door and interacts with the 737 passengers who just enjoyed their flight.
We get a chance to meet the people here. Even though we're in the cockpit, we have a closed door. We get out and groom the aircraft. We talk to the people. The crew are amazing. Captains are fantastic. I can't complain. Honestly, it's a fantastic job.
WestJet is a modern, efficient airline. It's built on the philosophy that running a profitable airline is all about service and efficiency. With employees like Raylene as stockholders, who can argue with that logic?
The Aviators, for everyone who has ever gazed skywards.
For more information on today's segments, visit www.theaviators.tv.